to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it. Chop it up. Chop. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it. Chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about. Come to the show. We about to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we could talk about. Come to the show. We about to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it. Chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about.
Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of the Chop Shop. I'm excited and blessed that we have the privilege to come to you again on another Thursday. God-given privilege that we might be able to talk about the things that matter here in Baltimore. I gotta, before I do anything else, bring on my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka, pits on the ones and twos, making the magic happen. Techniques 1200, because anything else is uncivilized. Bro,
what's good, Marv?
Gotta shout the young man out today. I gotta give him a pat on the back for a long time now. Tax sales and people losing their properties unjustly has been a big problem in Baltimore. And the young man, the mayor, made a power move today. They purchased 450-something tax sale properties on the city's dime to save Baltimore City residents' houses.
That's love right there. That's love. Hey, Marv, that's love right there, baby. That's
Listen,
love.
man, 452 occupied homes. We ain't talking about spaces where people don't live, though. 452 people ain't got to worry about losing their house, man.
That's
I don't care what your politics is. I tell y'all all the time, I'm a registered independent, and I don't really tout for nobody. But when the brother get it right, he get it right. And on this one, man, he got it right.
Now, love is love, Marv. Love is love, and you can't, no matter how you feel, like you said, no matter how you feel about a particular situation or person, you should have it within you to give it when it's due.
Give it when it's due. That's just what men and listen. I'm gonna put it in that realm. That's just what men do. You know what I mean?
Brother,
I'm a diehard Ravens fan, but I couldn't help but recognize Brady greatness.
Hold on. I'm gonna give you one better. I can't even speak the brother gone, but this certain plays like I'd never hang out with yo. Oh, we could never hang out, but he nice.
Kobe.
Kobe.
I could listen, but I couldn't deny his greatness.
That's what I'm saying. Like I didn't want to speak bad because the brother's gone, but I'm like, that's a brother who personally, I'm like, I don't know. But on the court, I'm like, nah, I don't want to hear it. He's him.
Listen, you can say what you want. I don't care what your politics is. This time they got it right.
Right,
shout out.
Got it right.
452 people who are living in their properties that had tax sale, dreaming down their neck like the Grim Reaper. What's up, Keith Shannon? Hey, Monya Smith. They can sleep easy tonight. They can rest easy.
Listen, Mark. So
tonight.
when we talking about numbers, and y'all like to throw those 300 and change, the murders and all those numbers, don't forget these numbers.
Don't forget that 452.
Don't forget the 452.
Give it its due, even if you only do it for a minute. Give it its due. 452 homeowners, families, people that are because the thing I gotta keep, they're occupied homes.
That's
the
big,
people
Mark.
live. They did their due diligence to make sure that the people are in them homes.
That's big, Mark.
And they ain't got to worry about losing them to tax sale. Shout out, man, Brandon Scott, and your team for getting it right on that one, man. We'll get back to all the other stuff later, but I gotta give you yours today. Let's get to these church announcements. Stop the Beef hotline is always jumping off, man. 2 phone numbers. When you call them, there's a man on the other end of them ready to do whatever level of intervention is needed. We do mediation. We purchase tickets, plane tickets, train tickets, whatever we got to do to get you out of harm's way. Ultimately, we'll pay the debt if need be, but you've got to dial a number. So if you or someone you love is in danger, call the Stop the Beef hotline. This is an initiative of the We Are Us men's movement who are still making it happen in Baltimore, along with the Baltimore Peace Agreement. We ain't just getting people out of harm's way. We taking it to the next level, going into the community. This is a 10-point plan that comes from the minds of people who are in the streets, who are in the game, and saying this is what we're willing to agree to. We taking it to the people. The people are signing up. Bring us to your neighborhood, to your community pastor, community leader. We come, we get them to agree that even if they got to eat in the streets, they ain't got to die in the streets. Let's keep it moving. Welcome back to school. This is a little late, y'all. It's a little late because hopefully they already back. But welcome back, 1301 McCullough Street. This is an initiative that's being supported by the We Are Us Men's Movement. But you see all of those many partners down the bottom that's come together to do this. It's going to be food trucks, market vendors, carnival games, giveaways. It's going to be one of them old Baltimore street festivals. Man, I miss them. And they're going to be giving out school supplies and stuff. It's happening on this Saturday. Then my man, Rich Mike, raised in Cherry Hill Mike, Mr. Michael Battle, is launching his Workforce Development Center. Listen, y'all, it's right there, 844 Roundview Road, the second level in the Old Patapsco Elementary School. It's for Cherry Hill, by Cherry Hill, but not limited to Cherry Hill. So if you know anybody that's in that community, Brooklyn, Wyman Park, all of those little surrounding areas that could use some real workforce development services, I need y'all to let them know that my man Rich Mike is taking his advocacy for the community he loves to the next level, man. This brother will tell you, Cherry Hill, he's born and bred. When he die, he's going to be Cherry Hill dead, just like me when it comes to Lexington Terrace. And just like this next young man who is Pennsylvania Avenue, Sandtown, Winchester, West Baltimore personified, I took his position as the mayor of West Baltimore. He was the original mayor of West Baltimore. I took the seat because I'm his little brother, and he is the man that has been responsible for educating me as it pertains to police reform. I often say when I talk about him, police reform wasn't my lane. My capacity and prowess working with youth got me into the police reform game, and I didn't have to feel like I didn't know how to navigate the waters because I had this brother to tap into anytime I needed him. He is a part of, listen, anything and everything that's happened meaningful in police reform in the last 10, 15 years, this brother and the people that work with him have been a part of it. Former executive director of the No Boundaries Coalition, former executive director of the Baltimore Community Mediation Center, and now one of the newest members of the 17-member board that has been established to explore what it's going to really look like for Baltimore to take back local control of its police force. He's here to educate us tonight. Give it up for my friend, my brother, Mr. Ray Kelly. What's up, bro?
What's going on, bro? Happy to be here as always.
Listen, I'm bringing him on better than Steve Harvey now, boy. I done settled into this thing a little bit. My intros is fire, and you deserve nothing but a top-notch intro. Good man. How you feeling, man? How things going?
Much appreciated, brother. I'm getting back into the swing. I've pretty much done my transition out of the monitoring team back to full-time community work. And I'm just settling in, man. I just came back from California. My daughter got married, and I'm in it feet deep.
Man, when you settle in big, because I was just with you a couple of weeks ago and you had the avenue on fire. You know how we do it, shorty on the grill. You know what I mean? All of us, they call us the usual suspects in West Baltimore.
Right.
We was on the ground and love was happening to the community. What y'all had, about 500 book bags out there that day? And
we had 300, but
300. Oh, you mean I topped you this year? Yeah. Listen, y'all.
We also had 100 hygiene bags, though.
Okay.
No, but it's just what you're talking about, man. That's that old school, just do stuff for the community. This ain't no celebrity showcase event.
But to say, listen, let me tell y'all, the same day he did his 300, I did 350. I get excited because his man has always been a measuring stick for what I'm doing in the community. And that ain't nothing but love. A big brother par excellence, man. I'm thankful that you were able to join us tonight. Let's jump right into this topic, man, because I remember when I first started he hollered you to the he let the air right out my chest, didn't he, Shaka? I remember when I first started getting knee deep into this, and when I found out about local control and that Baltimore did not have it. First of all, can you help people to understand historically how Baltimore came to a place where it does not have control of its own police department and what that actually means?
So we'll start with a history of real policing. So we all know that municipal police departments didn't come about till after emancipation. So historically, you had sheriff, he had his deputies, they enforced the law. The people that policed the streets was the guys on the plantations and stuff that fix the fences and the potholes. That's policing. You've been out Hagerstown and you got to police the fields, you clean up. So that's what police mean, to keep clean. Post emancipation, there was a need to control the newly freed slaves. So they created these police departments, which hired the people that policed the grounds on the plantations and the overseers. So that's where you get a police officer comes post emancipation, and their job was to protect the property of the former slave owners from the fear of reprisal from treating people bad for 400 years. So Baltimore's issue predates even that. So it was in 1860, Civil War still going on, and they were having protests and riots downtown in Baltimore because in that time Baltimore was what was considered a free city. So you had black people there that was getting paid even though Maryland was a slave state. So because they had these protesters and this group called the Know Nothings felt like the city government were sympathizers to the Union, the state took control of the police department to make sure that the city wasn't showing bias. So white people rioted in 1860 and it caused them to take control of our police department, and we've never gotten it back 160 years ago.
Wow, so outdated in concept. But one of the things that that really always got me as we talked about that, and I began to learn more about it, is the reality that although we don't have control, we bear all the liability in these cases, whether it's GTTF or any of these cases of excessive force and things of that nature. Talk to the people about that, Ray.
So historically, Baltimore has contributed 98+% of the operating costs for BPD without having any say on how they actually operate. So essentially, the city has just been paying for it the way it is for 150 some years. And like you say, we assume all the liabilities, we assume the payroll through the city budget and all of that. But we historically have had to go to the state to make decisions, small decisions. We can't redistrict our police department, meaning shift the number of officers in each district, because that's a legislative issue right now. So this is hopefully the start to change all that.
Man, that's why I said a while ago, that Brandon Scott has courageously decided that he was going to make this a real thing, and it's going on the ballot, because these have been talking points in several recent elections, but no mayor has actually taken the necessary steps to make this happen. I know it was a big talking point for Mayor Catherine Pugh, but nothing happened. Why is it that we would see people talk through electoral processes that this was going to be something that was important to them, and then they turn tail and run from it?
Well, for one, public safety and police reform is always cancer for politicians. And you know yourself, that was the first CODIF recommendation, return public local control back to the BPD, where we know there can't be accountability until the police department is actually accountable to us. But in essence, that's systemic change, and the system just don't want to change. We were lucky on this thing. I won't say lucky. We put in the work where really this is an issue where we've been working on the mayor with this for a lot of years. When I first found out about this local control issue, it was working with Councilman Nick Mosby, then Councilman Nick Mosby, to strengthen the CRB. So really now we have a Baltimore contingency that's come up knowing about these injustices. We've fought for it for so long that we've kind of dispelled all the myths. We've kind of gotten legal opinions. So the bill that made this possible was submitted by Senator Corey McCray, who 5 years ago was adamantly against it. He felt like the liability would be too much for the city and so on and so forth, where it was just a matter of sticking with it. It's been like a 10-year fight to get local control for me.
So let me say that, because we see that there are many different spaces in which this police thing seems to operate in. Of course, that we just saw the repeal of LEOBR, and there's some other things that are going to be coming into play in a few more years. You have a union where we still, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have a CRB. We have a consent decree. We're now talking about local control. How does local control impact some of those other areas? We're talking about the fact that there's still legislative reforms that have come at the state level that are not in practice. Are any of those issues impacted by Baltimore City having local control over its police department? I know one of the things we talked a lot about was some carve-outs because of Baltimore City's unique problems. Does that give us the power to carve out and do some things differently, or are we still kind of in the same space as it pertains to state legislation?
So administratively, we would get the possibility to make decisions for the police department. So it wouldn't be still under that specific legislative carve out now. It would be about the city setting up the structure to make the decisions. We wouldn't have to go through a state process, but the legislative changes from this year definitely have impact on certain aspects of oversight, certain aspects of administrative prowess and how that structure would be. So it's definitely going to be a semblance of change. It's going to be a whole different paradigm structurally on how this police department is overseen, so to speak. That the decisions now for how the police department operates would come down from city council as opposed to state legislature, which is the way it should be, and which is the way it is in every other municipality except for one in this country.
Wow, that's major. So when we start to talk about giving the power back to the people, because their local representatives are the ones who will be able to put oversight and things of that nature in place, what are some of the things that we can expect to be directly impacted? Because you're a guy that has great insight into this world of policing. One of the experts, while you've never worn the uniform, you pretty much understand their operations. What are some of the things that we can look to be impacted by these kinds of changes?
So I think the most important for us is we get access to the police department. So things that affect us, we don't have to wait anymore for a legislative session to actually try to convince people that have nothing to do with Baltimore that we need these changes. Now, this can be something that can be voted on right here in Baltimore City. It can be hashed out at City Hall, and that gives the impacted communities more access. It also creates the paradigm of more accountability, because when we have issues in our neighborhoods, we go to our councilman, where we don't really have that Annapolis access like we have that immediate access in the city. So that makes it less barriers to accountability for the police department because it's all local. And we also have now the opportunity to revisit a lot of oversight structures, the CRB. So we do you mentioned earlier the collective bargaining agreement, which we do have a collective bargaining agreement, but that's going to have to be affected now because of these changes where it's not about only state law now. Now it's also about city charter. And I'm saying it in like it's already in existence because I'm speaking it into existence because this is what needs to happen and this is what we're going to make happen.
How does returning local control impact the completion of the consent decree or the process of completing the consent decree? Does the city have any more of an ability to push? Is it a non-factor? How does it impact this consent decree that's costing us $1.5 million a year?
So the consent decree costing you more than that. Let me tell you right off the bat. That's how much the
that's the monitoring team, right?
That's how much the monitoring team costs you.
Right.
But so the consent decree is a federal document outside of any oversight structure that was mandated by the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. It doesn't affect the consent decree at all. So the federal government took Baltimore City and the police department to court, and they're named on that consent decree. And no matter how you flip it, batter it, and fry it, they're accountable to what's written in that document. So still, the onus has always fell on the city to comply with the consent decree.
So let's shift a little bit back to talking about the formation of the board, because it's my understanding, I did a little bit of research, that it's a 17-member board. Talk to us a little bit about how they come to that number 17 and the scope of work for what's being asked for the board that's exploring this issue of bringing local control back.
So how they come with the number, I think, is because, like you said, this whole policing thing in Baltimore City is so expansive that there are a lot of entities that would have influence on the transfer. So you would definitely have to have a representative from the governor's office and from the legislature's office, as well as those same municipal leaderships, the mayor and the city council. And then I'm always against, but theoretically you need a representative from the police union to kind of give you the insight on what's in their contract and what wouldn't work and what would work and so on and so forth. So I think the makeup, even though it sounds like a high and crazy number, was a genuine effort to be all inclusive.
Everybody at the table.
Right. And then to have 6 community advocates at large is a big thing. So I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah, with that number 17, 6 can be a majority if they band together.
I agree.
That's more than a third.
I agree.
Listen, I've been paying attention and did the math, brother. Talk to us about the scope of work. Like, what is it? Because we already know. Matter of fact, if my understanding is incorrect, correct me, that this is going to be put on the ballot in one of the next 2 upcoming elections. So what is it that this board is supposed to give us before that process takes place?
So this board is charged with 6 specific tasks. The first is what you said, the implementation of the ongoing consent decree. So we got to see how local control would affect the consent decree, what ramifications, what would have to be changed, and things of that nature. So that's the first priority, is to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the compliance with the consent decree. And then the second thing is the management of the police department. Who and what structure will actually be the administrators to the police department, how that would look, and who would they, for lack of a better term, be accountable to. And then you would have another issue that we're tasked with researching, is the transfer of personnel. So what would it look like to not only transfer the administrative personnel, but also switching from city entity, the officers, switching to a city entity and making sure that these are now recognized as municipal employees and not state employees and things of that nature. We also have to research different models of local control and figure out what's the best path forward for Baltimore City and how we do that. Of course, the financial impacts and the liabilities. And I think the final is the proper wording for the charter amendment that would be needed that would actually go to the polls to make this thing a reality.
How far off is it? Do we know which election? Are they aiming for the upcoming midterm, or will it most likely be a part of the next?
In 2022 or 2024. We're aiming for 2022. So essentially, we have to have a final report submitted to the city by the end of June to make this happen in 2022. And that's our goal. A lot of the research work, has already been done. We got it, it's documented. We have ideas and community on the path they should take. Part of that board, the mayor's office, the city council's office, they've been working with us, so they know that people have been working on a path and what it should look like. So I think it's a positive movement. The right people are there, and even though it seems like it's a time crunch to get it done by May, you on code if you know most of this work was done 10 years ago.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of bringing it to bear.
Well, it's a matter of debating the specifics. So we've come up with this path in community. We've talked to subject matter experts all around the country. But what we haven't done is actually had an intentional debate or negotiation, rather, at the table about this issue. This is the first time there's a possibility that it could actually happen now that legislation's been passed.
So let's shift a little bit because we're getting great education tonight. You on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday at 6 p.m. And tonight we on for my big brother, Mr. Ray Kelly, talking about the return of local control of Baltimore City's police department to the city of Baltimore after years and years and years of being controlled or being seen as a state agency. Ray, what should community members be doing right now to gear themselves up for this transition? I know we got a board that's been formulated. We got you and 5 other true community advocates as representatives on the board. But if I'm Joe Citizen, what should I be doing right now to gear myself up and be ready for this transition?
Well, the very first thing you should be doing is registering to vote, because this is going to be a ballot initiative, and it's going to be up to the residents of Baltimore to actually make this happen. I think for us on the board, our job is to make sure that we're educating people while we're in this process. So it can't be a closed door process, but more an open process so people can hear the pros and cons in real time. And once again, we have to kind of go outside of our impacted communities to educate other communities that don't feel like they need this on equity in policing and the history of policing and why is Baltimore City a state agency and no other municipality in the state a state agency, and just kind of focus on the fact that this was done because of racism 160 years ago. And if we're ever going to have equity in the city, then we have to first take this step. If we want to see all these other grand things we want to see with the police department, we have to first make sure that police department is accountable to us.
He on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday at 6 p.m. We talking to my friend and my brother, Mr. Ray Kelly, about the return of local control over Baltimore's police department to the city of Baltimore. And Ray, I know when we did the work on code, if we had deliberate access points and opportunities for Baltimore residents to be able to come in to contribute to the work and to hear about the work, is that something that's fixed into this board's work?
So it's a suggestion that I made at the initial hearing. It's not really stitched in the education piece, but it's stitched into my being. It's what I do, and even if the city isn't putting that word out there and educating their community, CPP is going to be educating community members and making sure that we're bringing the impacted community to this conversation. I definitely spoke to Mayor Scott and asked him directly, because of our experience with CODA, will we have the necessary support from the city to actually get this done, the administrative support and any kind of financial support we would need to actually get it done, and not just work the hell out of a bunch of volunteers, but actually have the city working to get this done. And he assured me that we would. So
talk to us a little bit about that, man, because that became a real thing as we had to go out and in some spaces raise our own money. And literally the final report was actually the product of the hands of people that were a part of CODIV that, shouldn't have particularly had to sit down and type up and bang out a report. Talk to the people so that they'll understand what it means when you start talking about the specific nature of support that you hope to get from the city, from this volunteer entity, this army of volunteers that's trying to produce such a major work in Baltimore.
Well, I think it's needed that we have the city is there at every turn, taking notes, digesting all this. It should be on the city and not me to educate the residents on this. So we want to make sure that they have that administrative report. They're typing up the minutes, that the city is full-time in the know, so they can share those minutes of our meeting with all the other councilmen as well as the community members, where this has to be an intentional effort, and they got to address it with some sense of urgency because they know the time. So like you said, we can't spend a couple of months trying to find funding so we can go talk to subject matter experts or go to different cities that's gone through these types of transition. We got to make sure that the city is on board from the jump, and not just the volunteers that are working for a community, but all of the influences citywide are given a true effort to actually get this done.
Have you guys been given a budget up front, or just saying that this
we haven't met? Our first meeting is October the 7th. So we actually haven't met yet. I'll be honest, I don't know who the assignees are going to be. I don't know who's going to be the governor's assignee and who's going to come from Speaker of the House's representative and things of that nature. So we haven't met the crossover yet.
Okay, so you do know the other community advocates?
I do. I know everyone that was actually appointed. So
okay,
it is people that have been working on these issues.
Can we say who they are on the show? Can I get credit for breaking the news?
Is it breaking news? I thought we broke it.
I don't know. They broke it, but let's break it again.
Okay, so you got Mark Anderson, who's the president of the Coldstream Neighborhood Association. You got Kaylin Young, who's the director of policy for the ACLU. Used to be the mayor's director of policy, I believe. You have Trey Murphy, who works with the NAACP, LDF, and Organizing Black. You got Lydia Walter Rodriguez, who works with CASA and the Hispanic community, and Ashia Parker with the No Boundaries. and myself.
Okay,
And
so all things considered, we got you in the shit, really. No, I'm joking.
cut it out. Cut it out.
No, I mean, listen, man. I respect every one of those organizations, the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund. I respect ACLU, all of that. But I mean, when we come to the end of this thing, you got to know who the voices are that's advocating for you, that have been the consistent voices in the struggle. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I got trust issues when it
I hear
comes to
you.
these agencies, right? Because we have seen where there's been a shift and I'm not talking about any particular agency that's been mentioned. I'm just talking truth. And correct me if I'm wrong. We have seen where for the right political interest, the right funding issue, we've seen people take a hard shift and turn on these types of issues, to do what suits the municipality. And this one right here really has got to be for the people, man.
I agree. And I think that's why municipal support is so important because we got to have one, a consistent message coming out of this advisory board. It can't be me saying one thing, FOP saying something else, the governor's office saying this, and no boundary saying we got to have one consistent message in real time coming from this advisory board. We have to understand that even though we come from different ideals, when we go into this room, we have a task at hand. And I hear you. I personally, I hear you. I'll leave it at that.
I mean, listen, I'm
I
always
personally have
skeptical.
reservations on certain aspects of it, but I also know that this is going to come down, if it's going to happen in the end, to a vote of the people. And I know for a fact that this is what the people in Baltimore want. They want the police department to be accountable to them. So you know how it is. It's always
Yeah.
some old foolishness
So
and
so so
egos and this stuff.
but I want to get into the weeds of what this means, because we know that the two ends of the hallway in City Hall have had some epic battles, in the past as it pertains to certain things. When local control kicks in, who actually has the control? Is it the mayor's office? Is it the city council? Who talk to us a
None
little
of
bit
that's
so we
decided.
understand that?
None of that's decided yet. That's all of what this advisory board has to figure out and put that plan forward. So it's
Are
kind of
you?
that's why
Now,
that's another reason why it
what
has to be open.
I'm about to put you on. I was about to put you on the hot seat. What?
Come
Give
on.
it. What is your preference? What do you feel as though best represents the people, or do you want to save that for the closed door conversations?
Well, I feel like the final decision making process should go to the council. The mayor already has the power to hire and fire a commissioner. How the department operates day to day, how their budget structures, I think that should be with city council because that's more of a diverse representation of the communities that these police serve, more so than just one top entity being the mayor. I think
Who has an interest in it to protect itself?
I agree. And I think before the mayor that we have became the mayor, he was all about disseminating some of the power that the mayor has to city
The council.
council.
Yeah, that's documented.
And that's facts on
That's
paper.
documented. Yeah.
So I see that he knew at one time the right way to go. I don't think that's changed. And I'll be
You
honest, I don't think he really wants the headache of being totally responsible for all of it. Maybe after research and the feasibility study, the direct oversight might go to the city administrator. But I think the decision making on how it operates, what the budget should be, what the structure should be, should definitely fall on city council.
You on Live with the Chop Shop. We come to you every Thursday. We talking to one of the new appointees to the mayor's 17-member board to explore local control of Baltimore City Police being returned to Baltimore City. Ray, we were clear when we did the work on CODIF, and really before that, the Civilian Review Board, which is an oversight entity here that exists in Baltimore, to have oversight over Baltimore Police Department was weak from its operating statute, the thing that made it a thing, all the way up into the fact that Baltimore's police department had no accountability to them as it pertained to their investigations and things of that nature. How does this change the dynamics, or does it change the dynamics as it currently exists with the Civilian Review Board?
Yeah, so I mentioned that earlier, and that's one thing that we know will have to change, because one, the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights has been repealed. So that legislation created a statewide oversight structure for all police departments, which, quite frankly, doesn't have as much power as the power Baltimore City has fought for in the CRB. So even though the CRB isn't as strong as we like, they do have that investigatory power and things of that nature, which they would lose if the state had its oversight entity. But once again, we do have an enabling charter where technically the Civilian Review Board will be easier to strengthen now that if Baltimore becomes a city agency. And there's one thing that everybody is forgetting to factor into this, is Baltimore City, by way of charter, also has what's called the Public Safety Advisory Board, which was made by legislation. They were actually selected right before the start of the pandemic, and that's part of their onus, is to consult, research, and help improve initiatives moving forward with the Baltimore Police Department. And they are now an established entity that's going to outlive the consent decree. They're going to be there forever. They can serve 4-year terms, so they'll also have say in this as well. So really, like I said, because we are a state agency and that's like not the norm, there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of parties that have say in how this move forward. But in the end, the people get to actually say at the polls if this is going to happen.
So even if we look at the city administrator, the mayor, the city council people as being the people who assume the responsibility, is it likely that we might see some independent entity have oversight over the entire thing? So it being in the best interest of, say, the city council to create an oversight entity that can do the more in the weeds stuff of oversight once this thing is, ratified as local control? Or should that even be another thing that's added to the plate of the Baltimore City Council?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean,
well, let me put it this way: should we expect that it would be thorough if it's the Baltimore City Council, as opposed to somebody that has that responsibility, an independent board? Is that something that's even being talked about?
Well, I think now more than ever is when we bring what we talked about at CODIF, is that Office of Police Accountability to the city that's independent of all that. For me, that's what true oversight would look like. I feel like structurally in the beginning, how that looks should fall on city council. But beyond that point, you're right. There should be an independent Office of Police Accountability, and there should be a strong board of civilians that serve as civilian oversight.
Is that a part of the well, should we, because you guys haven't met yet, should we expect that to be a conversation that
Definitely,
takes place in the room?
definitely, definitely. Civilian oversight has always been my thing, and like I said, we've got multiple maps, blueprints on the table where if this was ever to come into fruition, we would be prepared. I think we are much more prepared than people think. People
We
think this is just a new thought, and it's not.
Oh, absolutely not. This conversation is one that's been taking place for a really, really long time. When we start to talk about the liability aspect of things and talk liability, as you said, 5 years ago, Senator McCray was completely against it because of the idea of liability. Unpack to the people what the reality of liability is look like when it comes down to Baltimore Police Department and its misgivings on the city of Baltimore.
So the issue with the tort liability was in the language of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which is gone. There was one particular instance where, because of state control, they had a cap, and Baltimore City didn't have a cap. So they were saying that if this happens, the city will be liable for blah, blah, blah. But what they weren't saying in that conversation is the city has always been liable. So no matter what the case, the city has always had to pay the money. It's never been as much as the state controlled the funding as much as the state had caps on that funding. So on that specific instance, there was a mandated state cap because of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. But whatever that amount was, the city still paid it. So in a spirit of reform and better community and police relations, my brain would tell me that there should be less instances to have liability payments for, because we're having a reformed police department. So that argument to me was always moot, because we're reforming, we're trying to stop this abuse and trying to stop these lawsuits by reforming the police department.
So as we look at the reform that's taking place, is that something that influenced the decision? Because I hear the way you're saying it, in your opinion. Is that something you think that might have influenced Mayor Scott's decision, or is this just kind of one of those things that he has set in his heart to do?
No, I think Mayor Scott, as well as the council president, they've been on board with local control since this kind of came to light, because of the fact that we can never really have true accountability if we have to bring our visible objection to Annapolis in a 30-day session. If you remember when we had the protest following the George Floyd murder, and cities all around the country was like making immediate changes. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to do this no more.
We couldn't do that.
We couldn't do none of that. We had to wait till January to even propose. So that's why, in my perception, when we went to Annapolis this year, people were so frustrated, even our legislators, that all of those changes had to happen now. So just like Maryland was the first state to create a law enforcement officers Bill of Rights, now we're the first state to say that that was wrong, and we got to rethink what kind of privileges and allowances we give our police officers.
So, and I don't want to beat this dead horse, because what was it? Because we know that the conversation or the thing was always put out front was liability, even though the city was paying for it. What, in your opinion, were the real issues that kept Mayor Catherine Pugh, somebody who ran on local control and talked publicly about local control? What kept them backpedaling on it? What was it really?
It's a dirty issue. It's public safety. It's like it's the pendulum. So people always want more police when they perceive escalated violence or homicides. But then when you have Freddie Gray murdered, that pendulum swings the other way and people want reform. But for real, the money, the funders, the influencers are about safer city, bringing money in. So it's always a push. Everywhere in the country, really, there's a push for law and order, crime and safety, because, like I said in the beginning of your program, this whole concept of policing was created to protect the property of the affluent, essentially from us. So it's just a cancer. It always has been. Police reform has always been a cancer in the political realm because the contributors and the majority vote kind of buy into that argument that if we continue to invest in the police department, that our city will be safer.
So let's make it a little bit personal for the guy who has been on the front lines of these issues, who has literally turned his life around and committed his life to seeing to it that things would change. You know, they had a whole slogan, they would beat you up the Western District way and all of that sort of thing. I remember we were up there at Dr. A.C.D. Vaughn Church, and Lucky Crosby, my guy, stood up and said, I don't care what y'all talking about because the Western District been beating the brakes off black men in this city for a long time. Talk to me about you getting that phone call from whoever it was that may have reached out to you, and then you realize that this aspect of the work that you've contributed to for 10 years is becoming a reality.
So I think for me,
it's okay to cry, man.
Nah, for me, I think the avalanche for me came when it actually passed in the legislation, because I felt like then it was on us. It was up to us to make it happen once that legislation passed. I talked a lot about it while the session was going on, about how this was going to be the year where the nation has kind of gravitated to the same fight I've been fighting for 15 years. And that's going to be the push to take us over the top. And Speaker Jones's bill pretty much encompassed everything that we were talking about. And then it passed. And then it was like, and we get to have local control. So for me, even though you're right, it was emotional because
I would expect that it would be.
Nobody else trying to do it. Everybody thought I was crazy and you can't change the police and blah, blah, blah. And we just kept doing that work. And now we see it might have took 10 years, but we are realizing something that everybody told us wasn't possible. It would never happen. And that's what keeps me marching forward, because I think my proud moment will be that day, that election day. That'll be the first time you ever see me out there campaigning on election day. I'm going to be out there campaigning for local control. I'm going to have a shirt and all that.
Give me one too, man. And we're going to campaign on it. You know, election season around here, we do our people poll question. We're going to make sure that we bring all of that to bear, bring it to the table, because people need to know just how important this issue is. Give us your final thoughts as you would talk to the people about what we need. Oh, matter of fact, I had one more question. We know historically, recent history, we've seen where the right people are on multiple different sides of the issue, right? People that if they would unify would literally be the icing on the cake around this issue. Many people who advocate for reform, but if their baby isn't the one that's at the spotlight, not only are they not saying, okay, let's get this, then move to mine, but they're in some cases counterproductive to the movement. Are the people that have impacted these issues unified that this is a great place for us to move next?
I hope so. We always have issues in this city with self-serving interests and celebrity, so to speak. And for real, who's going to line your pockets the most? Where I have to hope that with the people that I know on this board, we'll be able to kind of call out that BS and hold each other accountable and make sure that everyone is not working in their own interest, but what's in the best interest for the city.
Does local control put a muzzle on Lodge 3?
Does the local control put a muzzle on who?
Lodge number 3.
No,
does it have an impact? Let me
No.
say, does it have any impact?
we still going to have a CBA, and we still going to have a police union, and I doubt if anything has shut them up. I think it's going to ruffle their feathers. It's probably going to, everything we do in police reform and then a fight with the FOP. So I'm sure in this advisory board, there'll be, I'll call it vigorous debate with the FOP. But in the end, FOP doesn't really have any say in this process. They are just one of the people in the room. They don't have a decision-making prowess. And once again, we take it to the polls at the end, and the people get to vote for it.
So talk to the people, man. Let's close out with you talking to the people.
So this whole local control venture is going to be about access and accountability for Baltimore City residents. So because we've been a state agency longer than any of us have been alive, we've never had equitable access. And this police department has never been accountable to the community that it serves. And if we actually want to see the reforms that are mandated by the consent decree happening, if we actually want to see a decrease in the police budget, if we actually want to see better in police and community relationships, then the police department has to work for us. They have to be accountable to us. And we have to make sure this happens. We can't let them say, well, we gave y'all the opportunity and you didn't come out and vote for it. Because in the end, when we become a city agency, we also get to go out and solicit funds as a city for the police department, so we can kind of supplement that $555 million budget.
Thank you, Mr. Ray Kelly, for being with us, man. You've been a constant contributor since God has blessed us with the vision to do the Chop Shop. You were on the very first episode ever. You remember that? A whole year
still here.
ago. And you're still here being a constant contributor, brother. I thank you. I'm sure that we'll be talking to you through the process. And you always come and you keep us educated with what we need to know and where we need to be around the issue of policing and so many other things that are impacting our community. Coming up next week, we're going to sit down with two of my absolute favorite people in the world as we talk about re-entry. One of the things that's been a hot button topic in this issue of public safety, has been how the recidivism rate, how the repeat offender is impacting what's going on in Baltimore crime. All right. Whether it be the recidivism rate, how many people are going back into prison because they're not being reformed or having the necessary opportunities when they come out. We're going to talk to Marlo Hargrove of the Face and Fraternal. I'm going to mess it up. The Face organization, who is a dear good friend and brother of mine that I grew up with all of my life, who's doing great work around ex-offenders. And we're going to talk to Miss Nicole Mundell of Out for Justice. I'm going to get that Face organization's acronym right for you. I know it's celebrating ex-offenders. Y'all forgive me. But we're going to have them talking about if, in fact, the necessary supports and the system to be able to help our brothers and sisters who are behind the walls doing time come out and have viable chance to be able to become a contributing citizen to the society. They'll talk about them repeat offending, but they won't talk about the fact that laws are prohibiting them from being able to get jobs and what the minimum wage is and how there are businesses that are allowed to prostitute people who are returning citizens because of the minimum wage. We're going to talk about all of it here on next week, so I need you to be in place. I want to thank again our guest, Mr. Ray Kelly, for being with us tonight, always bringing the good information and making sure that we are informed. I got to thank my right hand, my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts on the ones and twos, Techniques 1200, because anything else is undignified. And most important, I got to thank you, our listening audience. I always say, if a tree falls in the woods and doesn't make a sound, and nobody's around the head, doesn't make a sound. Yes, it makes a sound. Just was nobody there. And you guys show up, show out, you contribute, you make sure that you're a part of the conversation. Please continue to do that for us. And we'll continue to try to bring you great content every Thursday at 6 p.m. here on the Chop Shop. I need y'all, as we're preparing for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, to understand that you're going to see something a little different. We're going to be spending most of the month of October talking to faith leaders around faith and social topics. Make sure that you are tuned in because these conversations are always edifying. Before we check out, I always tell you to love Baltimore. This is my city. This city gave me my second chance and embraced me when I came back and said, I want to do right. I thank God for being able to being planted in this city and make a contribution to it. Trust God. The Bible declares, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, and all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. When I changed my choices to align them with the word of God, it completely changed my life, y'all. Be the change that you want to see. Don't sit on the sidelines or do nothing and criticize everything that somebody else may be doing or just have an opinion. There may not be a movement or organization or 501c3 in you, but that kid that's down the street that don't have a father, he may just need you to get him when you get yours so you can bring change to his life. And no matter what, always remember that we can be more. Thank you for tuning in.
I can be more. There's nothing that I can achieve if I just believe. You can be more. You can make every dream a reality. We can be more.
Be more, I pray I be more. It's easy to achieve anything you believe. Like hold your head high, girl, you got a reason to breathe. I see a rare mind, boy, you got a reason to dream. Let's take flight, give the children a reason to see redemption. We grow up in the jacks where it's evil and wicked, where the people with success don't want to send you a visit, but we still finna make this life worth living. Now throw your hands to the sky if you feel it. Hey, throw your hands to the sky if you the realest. You got a vision, let's put them pistols away and make sure the OGs keep the community safe. In the world where the ladies crying, the babies dying, I think